The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition or give any medical or legal advice. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, that is me down at the compound tonight. Tonight, we're going to be a little bit different than we normally are. So go get a cup of Java. Go find yourself a nice, comfy chair to sit in, because tonight we're going to be talking about World War II. We're going to be talking about a bomber pilot that was shot down over Germany during World War II. He survived. A lot of them did not make it through the war. And his plane was called Susan Ruth. We'll know more about it right after this.
Please check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give a buck or two. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Night Dreams Talk Radio thank you for your support. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, that is me. Steve Snyder is our guest tonight, and he's going to be talking about his father, Howard Snyder, the pilot of the Susan Ruth. Hey, Steve, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well,
pleasure.
I'm glad you're here. So, tell us a little bit about you. What got you to write this book about Shot Down?
Okay. I was born in Pasadena, California. Born and raised, lived in Southern California all my life. Graduated from UCLA. During my career occupation, I was in sales and sales management for 40 years. The last 36 was with a company called Vision Service Plan, VSP, which provides vision care as an employee benefit that corporations offer their employees to cover eye exams, glasses, and contact lenses. And I traveled quite a bit all over the United States working for them. And then I retired in 2009, and that's when I had time to really delve into my dad's war history in more detail. Growing up, I knew the basics. I knew he was a B-17 pilot. He was stationed with the 8th Air Force in England. His plane was named the Susan Ruth after my oldest sister, who was 1 year old at the time that he went overseas. And he flew bombing missions over occupied Europe and Germany. And on February 8th of 1944, his plane was shot down over Belgium. And after he bailed out, he was missing in action for 7 months, but he evaded capture and eventually made it back to England. After I retired, I just wanted to learn more about my dad's World War II history. My parents had kept a lot of material from the war years, and I wanted to go through that, kind of organize it, and see what else I could find out. At that time, I had no intention at all of writing a book. There were 2 items that were really significant. One was a diary that my dad wrote while he was missing in action about his plane being shot down, and it is absolutely riveting, and it's included in the book. And the other were all the letters that my father had written to my mother while he was stationed in England, and he was very candid in those letters. he talked about what bombing missions were like. He talked about what life was like on the base, what life was like in England and London at the time, escapades of him and his crew. And it was just fascinating reading those letters. And I became fascinated with the story of my dad and his crew. And it ended up becoming my passion. I started reading book after book about the air war over Europe. I went on the internet, spent countless hours doing research, downloading declassified military documents. I went on a quest to find relatives of all his crew members. B-17 had a 10-man crew, and I was able to find relatives of all his crew members, and I would ask them if they had any information they could send to me, letters, newspaper articles, pictures, what have you. Just trying to learn more. I joined a number of World War II organizations, started going to reunions, listening to veterans tell their stories. And finally, 3 years into this, my research, and I just came to the conclusion that the story of my dad and his crew was so unique and so compelling that it needed to be told. People needed to read about it, so I decided to write a book.
Well, I'm glad you did. How many missions did he fly over Germany?
He was shot down on his 8th mission. Some of his crew members had more missions than him, some had less. He was the captain on the basketball team. My dad was 6'3", which back 70 years ago was tall. He played center on the basketball team, but he tore the ligaments in his ankle, and he couldn't fly for a couple months. So some of his other crew members had more missions than he did, but he was shot down on his 8th.
He even 8, he was really lucky. I mean, a lot of those B-17s were shot down. I mean, they didn't even make it to their normal, I think it was it 30 or something like that missions they had to fly or something?
Well, initially there was no mission limits, and the 8th Air Force started flying bombing missions in August of 1942. Actually, August 17th was the first mission. And throughout the rest of that year in 42 and the beginning of 43, the morale of these combat crews was really going into the tank, because it didn't take them long to figure out that they were never going to make it back home. They were either going to be killed or their planes were going to be shot down and they were going to become prisoners of war. So in the spring of 1943, the 8th Air Force decided to incorporate a mission limit to give them some hope. So in the spring of 43, they implemented a 25 mission limit, which if you hit it, you would be able to come home. They'd have a little light at the end of the tunnel. Although, even though they implemented that mission limit, it was statistically impossible to complete 25 missions. In 1943, the average number of missions flown before being shot down was only 6.
Oh, wow. Did you ever find out actually how many B-17s we lost from being shot down during the campaign over Germany?
Yeah, there was 12,731 B-17s that were manufactured. Not all of them got into the war, but there was over 4,500 of them were shot down. So probably about 40%.
That is,
of the B-17s were shot down.
Yeah, I could see being a crew member on one, that you'd have to worry about being shot down. You'd have to worry about the Germans, fighters coming up, and the flak. But I've seen some footage of all these B-17s, being shot down. That is something I can't even imagine being in one of those planes when it got hit. Of course, they did take a lot of flak before a lot of them would go down. They were so well engineered and built.
Yeah, the B-17, it was nicknamed the Flying Fortress because it had 13 50 caliber machine guns, so it could put out a lot of firepower. And like you said, it could take a tremendous amount of battle damage and continue flying. So the B-17 saved a lot of guys' lives limping back to England after being shot up on bombing missions. There were 26,000 men that were killed in the 8th Air Force during the war, which was more than the entire Marine Corps fighting in the Pacific.
Oh, I
And
believe
another
that.
28,000 men became prisoners of war after their planes were knocked out of the sky, as you mentioned, either from being attacked by German fighters or anti-aircraft fire flak.
Well, I know my father numerous times mentioned it was two places he would never want to be in on B-17 again, and that was the belly turret and the rear turret.
Yeah, actually, the worst place to be was in the plexiglass nose of the plane, where the navigator and the bombardier sat. They actually had more losses than other crew positions in the plane.
I wouldn't doubt that.
But being a combat crewman in the 8th Air Force during World War II was the most dangerous duty assignment in the United States military. You know, even being on the front lines, on the ground, it was amazing what those guys went through. And yet, any day that they went up could be their last day in a bombing mission, and a lot of their friends didn't come back. So it was they had a lot of fortitude to go up there day after day.
Well, I remember one time my father, who was a bombardier and a radio operator. He was first a radio operator. That was back probably before World War II. And then, he became an officer. He was a lieutenant, and he was a bombardier. And, he told me such scary stories. But I remember one time my grandfather was in World War II and, served on the ground and also in the military police. And I remember one time, they were over for some dinner or something, and they got in an argument because my grandfather's saying, oh, you were so lucky, being in these planes while we were on the ground and we had to worry about this and this. And my father said, hey, have you ever seen what it's like to get shot at through an airplane?
Yeah, the aluminum skin on those B-17s, it was so thin that you could just take a screwdriver and poke it right through it. So the 20-millimeter cannon fire from those German fighters, or the shrapnel from those flak shells exploding, could just rip through the fuselage.